There are truths we were never meant to hold for long. Truths that bend the mind when stretched beyond a single lifetime. If every choice you made echoed for centuries, who would you become? If every mistake returned again and again, what kind of world would that create? If you want to explore the worlds that almost replaced ours, subscribe. Welcome to Parallel History. In the early 21st century, humanity stood on the edge of two possible futures. The world of 2025 was marked by astonishing contradictions, breathtaking technological achievements paired with fragile political alliances, surging medical breakthroughs shadowed by deep moral uncertainty. Nations pushed the limits of genetics, biotechnology, and longevity research. Research institutions in the United States, Europe, China, and Japan raced to decode aging, not merely as a biological process, but as a solvable equation. Scientists had already mapped the hallmarks of aging: genomic instability, telomere attrition, mitochondrial decline. A few promising advances: CRISPR editing, senolytic drugs, AI-driven protein modeling hinted at the possibility that human life could be stretched further than ever imagined. Yet every breakthrough remained constrained by one brutal reality: biological systems resist radical extension. For all our ambition, the upper limit of human life seemed fixed. But the world of 2025 was also volatile. Nations competed fiercely for technological power. Major powers believed that whoever controlled biological enhancement would control the century. Behind closed doors, governments funded classified research on gene repair technologies, deep tissue rejuvenation, and radical life-extending treatments. It was a global race, one marked by the same tension that had defined nuclear physics in the mid-20th century. And then, on a winter morning in 2025, a discovery in a private biotech lab in Kyoto altered the trajectory of research. A small research team stumbled upon a mechanism for stabilizing telomeres at near-perfect efficiency, combining CRISPR-targeted repair with a novel viral vector that rewired cellular decay. Early tests on model organisms showed not just slower aging, but near-complete biological maintenance. A mouse with a natural lifespan of 3 years was predicted to live past 50. Governments took notice. Funding surged. The world accelerated toward a breakthrough that, if realized, would redefine civilization itself. But what if that moment had gone differently? What if the discovery didn't stall, collapse, or fall into secrecy, but succeeded? History didn't end. It just went elsewhere. The divergence begins in late 2025, when the Kyoto research team avoids a failure that occurred in our timeline. In reality, their telomere-stabilizing vector triggered immune collapse in long-term trials. But in this alternate world, their second-generation model successfully solves the immune response issue by combining two technologies that in our timeline never converged. First, a CRISPR-activated repair loop constantly scans for DNA damage and fixes it before replication errors accumulate. Second, the viral delivery system is modified with a synthetic sleeve developed through AI protein folding, making it invisible to the human immune system. The result is the most significant biological breakthrough in human history: a stable, self-maintaining genome capable of functioning for 5 centuries. The Kyoto team calls it the E500 protocol. The moment the first human trial succeeds, an elderly volunteer whose cells revert to biological youth within weeks, the Japanese government classifies the research. But secrecy doesn't last. Cyber espionage from rival nations begins almost immediately. The United States acquires partial data through intelligence assets in East Asia. China obtains the delivery vector, but not the repair loop. Europe, unable to steal the data, forms a research alliance to replicate the effect independently. By mid-2026, what began as a scientific milestone becomes a geopolitical competition unlike any in history. Each nation sees the same truth: whoever deploys E500 first would wield unimaginable power. A government whose leaders could live 500 years would possess continuity, memory, and long-term strategy unmatched by any empire before it. Economies would shift. Militaries would transform. Social systems would be rewritten. The world now stood on the verge of a biological arms race. To solidify their lead, Japan makes a radical decision. Instead of restricting E500, the government partners with private industry to accelerate scaling. Within a year, Japan becomes the first nation to legally approve human longevity modification for public use initially, limited to citizens over 60, later expanded to all adults. This decision triggers the true divergence. Once E500 enters society, aging is no longer a universal human experience. Political structures begin to warp, economic systems buckle under the pressure of multi-century lifespans, and the shockwaves begin. The first 1 to 5 years after the divergence, Japan becomes the epicenter of a transformation without precedent. Elderly citizens receiving E500 experience rapid reversal of biological aging, stabilizing at a healthy physiological age of around 30. Their lifespans extend, their productivity returns, their memories sharpen. Within 2 years, the nation's demographic pyramid inverts. Instead of a shrinking workforce, Japan becomes the only developed country with a rapidly expanding one. Global markets panic, the Japanese yen skyrockets, investors pour capital into companies tied to longevity treatment, but the rest of the world reacts with fear and urgency. In the United States, political leaders, where they are falling behind, push emergency funding for longevity programs. Aging becomes the centerpiece of the national security agenda for the first time since the space race. The entire scientific apparatus of the U.S. government pivots toward a single research goal. But America faces a unique challenge. An aging, polarized political system struggles to decide who should receive the treatment first. Veterans, scientists, billionaires, essential workers. The debate fractures society. Protests erupt. Religious groups condemn the theft of God's timeline, but the momentum is unstoppable. China, meanwhile, handles the crisis with authoritarian efficiency. The state accelerates its own Immortal Dragon initiative, mandating nationwide genetic screening to prepare citizens for mass treatment rollout. The government prioritizes military personnel, political elites, and key scientists. By year 4, China begins deploying a modified longevity therapy across its vast population, less stable than Japan's E500, but effective enough to extend life to roughly 300 years. Europe follows a cautious middle path. The European Union forms a unified biomedical authority to oversee distribution and ethics, but internal disagreements slow progress. Nations with strong religious influences delay adoption. Others push ahead aggressively. Europe falls behind. Then comes the first political aftershock. Leaders who undergo E500 no longer fear aging out of power. In Japan, a new class of century guardians emerges, leaders who can plan a fiscal policy not for the next 4 years, but the next 200. Their decisions begin reshaping Asia's balance of power. The United States fears a rising biological superpower. China fears losing its demographic dominance. Europe fears irrelevance. Meanwhile, in the developing world, resentment grows. Longevity becomes a symbol of global inequality. Nations unable to afford the treatment accuse wealthy countries of monopolizing the future. A new geopolitical divide emerges not between East and West, or North and South, but between the long-lived and the short-lived. By year 5, only 18% of the world's population has access to longevity treatment. The rest watch in anger as a new class of near-immortals begins to rise, and the ripple effects are only just beginning as the decades unfold. Society bends under the gravitational pull of extended life. Human civilization, once structured around the arc of an 80-year existence, begins to stretch, twist, and fracture as lifespans expand beyond imagination. In Japan, the long-lived generation becomes the backbone of a new national philosophy. Citizens begin planning 200-year careers, 300-year investments, and multi-century scientific projects. Universities radically redesign their curricula. 4-decade degrees, century-long research paths, apprenticeships lasting longer than entire lifetimes in the previous timeline. Scholars dedicated to fields like astrophysics, climate engineering, and deep-time ecology pursue projects whose payoff might not come until the year 2300. The nation's political system evolves as well. Term limits become obsolete. Stability replaces turnover. A new party system emerges, dominated by long-lived strategists who accumulate experience over centuries. Corruption becomes harder to hide, memory is long, and history is personal. Yet power becomes harder to dislodge. Leaders with 200 years of influence are nearly impossible to challenge. China undergoes transformation of a different kind. The government leverages extended lifespans to build the most skilled military force in history. Generals train for 80 years. Pilots accumulate flight time measured in decades. Commanders who fought in early 21st century skirmishes continue shaping military doctrine well into the 22nd. The Communist Party becomes a multi-century institution guided by elites whose reigns no longer depend on an 80-year biological limit. Yet China's longevity treatments, less stable than Japan's, come with consequences. After a century, side effects emerge: memory erosion, emotional flattening, and cellular burnout. Citizens begin to age mentally, even as their bodies remain youthful. A quiet crisis brews beneath the surface one. The state hides from the world. The United States evolves through conflict. For decades, political gridlock deepens as debates over distribution of longevity treatment dominate public life. Eventually, the government adopts a merit-based system. Citizens earn access through contributions to national science, infrastructure, or defense. A new cultural ideal emerges: the centennial citizen, a person expected to dedicate the first 120 years of life to service before reaping the rewards of extended existence. This reshapes American identity. Patriotism becomes measured in centuries. Cities grow vertically, built to accommodate populations that never shrink. Crime rates fall as human lives become too long to risk on impulsive actions. Art changes, literature unfolds across volumes that span decades. Film studios produce multi-generation epics intended to be watched over a lifetime. Europe, at first slow to adopt longevity, eventually becomes the cultural capital of the long-lived world. Artists, philosophers, and engineers with centuries of lifecraft, a renaissance that dwarfs the one of the 15th century. Cathedrals take 200 years to build as originally intended, but now with the same artisans working on them from start to finish. Opera houses feature performers who have trained for 90 years. Museums display artworks created across centuries by a single artist, evolving through multiple lifetimes of style. But demographics shift. Birth rates fall everywhere. Longevity becomes dominant. Families see no point in having children when their own lives stretch endlessly before them. A world with 500-year adults becomes a world with almost no newborns. Humanity begins a slow march toward demographic stagnation. Religion evolves unevenly. Some traditions reinterpret longevity as fulfilling human destiny. Others view it as a violation of divine design. New sects emerge, some worshiping longevity, others rejecting it. Pilgrimages become journeys lasting decades. The concept of sin changes when consequences play out over centuries. Forgiveness becomes harder. Grudges last lifetimes. Spiritual contemplation becomes deeper. Yet conflict between long-lived ideologies becomes more intense. Science, unbound from the short human lifespan, explodes. Researchers follow projects for 150 years uninterrupted. Quantum computing matures into cognitive architecture. Fusion energy becomes widespread. Climate engineering stabilizes global temperatures, though not without mistakes made by generations who must watch their failures unfold slowly. Medicine redefines what it means to be alive. Organs replaced with lab-grown constructs, neural interfaces extending cognition, memories stored and replayed like archives. The global order itself reshapes. Nations no longer rise and fall every few decades. Their policies stretch across centuries. Treaties last lifetimes. Wars become rarer. Not because of morality, but because no leader wants to spend 200 years dealing with the consequences of a conflict they started. Yet when wars do occur, they are devastating, guided by commanders with superhuman experience and patience. The planet, after a century of longevity, enters a new equilibrium. Humanity becomes stable, slow, deliberate. Innovation no longer surges in chaotic bursts, but unfolds in carefully planned waves. Civilization becomes a giant with a heartbeat measured in generations. But beneath the surface, the cost of extended life grows. And by the 3rd century after the divergence, humanity faces a crisis no one anticipated. By the time the world reaches the equivalent of our 22nd and 23rd centuries, humanity is almost unrecognizable. Nations are no longer defined by rapid political turnover or ideological swings. Instead, each country is shaped by the deeply entrenched philosophies of leaders who have ruled for centuries. Japan becomes a technocratic meritocracy led by the same elders who oversaw the original E500 rollout. Their governance model, refined through centuries of trial and error, spreads across East Asia. Borders soften. The region becomes a federation, built on stability and long-term planning. China becomes something stranger. Its longevity-modified citizens form castes based on the stability of their treatments. The early elites, suffering from mental degradation, form a shadow aristocracy whose power gradually wanes as their minds erode. New generations, those treated with improved protocols, rise, creating tension between the old century officials and the younger millennial guard. China becomes a nation caught between ancient leadership and emerging brilliance. The United States evolves into a civilization defined by achievement. Access to longevity is tied to contribution, creating a society that resembles a meritocratic republic stretched across time. Cities transform into towering labyrinths, housing citizens who have lived through 6 or 7 cultural eras. Century-long friendships and rivalries define politics. Governors serve for 80 years. Scientists spend entire lifetimes perfecting a single theory. America becomes a land where memory itself is a form of power. Europe becomes the cultural heart of the long world. Centuries-old composers write symphonies spanning multiple movements, each created decades apart. Philosophers craft ideas refined through hundreds of years of contemplation. Democracies stabilize as long-lived leaders mature beyond partisanship. The continent becomes a beacon of thought, art, and spiritual exploration. But new geopolitical structures take shape. Old nations dissolve. New ones arise. The Oceanic Coalition, a union of coastal cities, emerges to defend shared climate-engineered territories. The African Continental League rises as birth rates stabilize and longevity becomes widely accessible. A new Silk Road rebuilt by citizens with centuries to spare connects continents through layers of trade, culture, and scientific cooperation. Economically, the world shifts from consumerism to preservation. People no longer buy and discard, they build to last centuries. Architecture becomes monumental. Cities are designed for 500-year residents who demand beauty and durability. Skyscrapers resemble vertical ecosystems, multi-century habitats with forests, waterways, and renewable energy integrated into every level. Technology evolves in harmony with extended life. Neural interfaces become commonplace, allowing humans to augment memory, store knowledge, and collaborate across mental networks. Artificial intelligence, once feared, becomes a partner in long-term decision-making. Generation-scale infrastructure emerges: orbital rings, deep space telescopes, machines designed to run for 400 years. Yet, humanity's emotional landscape changes as well. Love becomes complex when relationships can last 3 centuries. Marriages often resemble alliances entered with caution, dissolved with regret. Friendships stretch across eras shaped by cycles of intimacy and distance. People reinvent themselves repeatedly. Some choose new careers every century. Others isolate themselves, overwhelmed by the weight of memory. And then there's the question no one expected. What does it mean to grow old internally while remaining young externally? By the 23rd century of this new world, humanity confronts a truth. The mind was not designed to bear 5 centuries of memory. Even with neural augmentation, trauma accumulates. Joy fades with repetition. Motivations shift. The greatest challenge of long life becomes psychological. To cope, societies develop new rituals. The centennial renewal, where citizens retreat for a decade to erase or rewrite memories. The second adolescence, a period of reinvention around age 200. And the quiet years, of voluntary withdrawal from public life after age 350. This is the world forged by the E500 Protocol, a world where humanity has mastered time. But not without consequences. Longevity always carried a price, one far deeper than politics or economics. As humanity stretched across centuries, the psychological toll became impossible to ignore. The first cost was identity. Humans evolved to build a self over decades, not centuries. But in this world, people carried so many experiences that their personalities fractured. A single person might live through 10 eras of culture, countless relationships, and generations of shifting norms. Memories blurred. The self became unstable. Psychiatrists coined a term for this condition: temporal drift, the slow fragmentation of identity as the mind struggled to anchor itself. The second cost was purpose. With centuries ahead, urgency dissolved. Goals lost meaning. People drifted through long decades of quiet aimlessness. Without the pressure of mortality, Ambition faded. Whole populations entered periods of centennial ennui, a society-wide listlessness where progress stalled, not for lack of time, but for lack of drive. The third cost was inequality. Longevity did not erase social divides, it deepened them. Those who received treatments first amassed centuries of wealth, knowledge, and influence, becoming untouchable. Their descendants inherited not just material fortune, but extended lives as well. Over time, a new global aristocracy formed the 5th-century class whose power spanned generations in a single lifetime. But the darkest cost was emotional. Human hearts were not built for centuries of loss. Friends died, those who refused treatment or could not access it. Cultures shifted. Values changed. Love, once a bright flame, risked becoming a slow, painful burn stretched across ages. Many long-lived citizens learned to detach, guarding themselves from centuries of grief. Humanity gained time, but lost immediacy. Lives became longer, but not always deeper, and the world wondered, was 5 centuries of life worth the weight it carried? In the end, the great experiment reshaped more than biology. It reshaped what it meant to be human. By stretching life beyond its natural boundaries, humanity unlocked potential once reserved for myth and legend. Civilizations gained stability. Knowledge deepened. The arc of progress extended across centuries instead of decades. Yet beneath every achievement lay the quiet truth that time is not neutral. It molds us, softens us, tests us. It reveals who we are when the years no longer run out. For some, extended life became liberation. For others, it became a burden. But for all, it was a reminder. History is fragile. The world we know is the result of lifespans, measured in decades, not centuries. If our time on Earth were longer, everything, every choice, every sacrifice, every regret would echo far further than we ever imagined. And perhaps that is the final lesson of this alternate timeline, that life's meaning comes not from its length, but from its limits. History didn't end, it just went elsewhere.